back to the podcast off the underside. Got another very, very special guest tonight, man. I'm a big fan of his, big fan of his podcast. It's Paul John Dykes. How you doing, Paul?
I'm brilliant. Thanks very much for asking me on to have a wee chat. Anytime, it's always a pleasure.
No, mate, honestly, it's a pleasure. It's like I say, I'm a big fan of yours, mate. I think your podcast's brilliant. Watch it daily. So Paul's a podcaster. He's a Celtic fan. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So, Paul, when did you get acquainted with the Celtic, mate, when you were younger and stuff like that? How did that come about?
Yeah, I always talk about this when people are talking about first games and all that kind of stuff. To be honest with you, I probably wanted to go to my first game a good 4 or 5 years before it happened. And that was due to the fact, and I know now it was due to the fact that my old fella enjoyed the football probably a wee bit too much with his mates. You know, it was one of the things where they're all meeting up Saturday 3 o'clock, obviously, and they're all going through in the buses, travelling through from Fife. And, you know, the whole thing, it was just like a big part of the week waiting on this happening. And he was a hard-working man, so, you know, you can't really deny it of him. And he would go with his mates and, you know, my mum's cousins and uncles and all, and brothers and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until 87 that I was finally allowed to go to a game, by which time, let me just quickly do the maths, I would have been 8 at that point. And it was a Tommy Burns testimonial. But as I say, omnipresent in my life, omnipresent in my house, New Year's gatherings of any description, presents were always Celtic related, that kind of thing. I've got cousins named after Charlie Nicholas, Brian McClare, Kenny Dalglish, Danny McGrain. You know, it just goes on and on, mate. It's always been there in my life.
That sounds very, very similar to me, mate. That's an identical kind of story, to be honest with you. So your first game was Tommy Burns testimony. That's a pretty decent one to go to, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, I remember things like the 1985 Scottish Cup final because the old man went to a game like that, and I would have loved it. But really, looking back, I was too young. I wouldn't have enjoyed that. I wouldn't have been able to embrace it. And I remember he came home missing an Adidas Samba trainer. He had lost his gutty after the winner by Frank McGarvey. So eventually when I got there a couple of years later, it was just like, what's this going to be like? Because you've watched it on the telly, but you know, it's the smells, the colours, the atmosphere that you can actually feel it. And I remember that game vividly. We were right behind the goal actually when Ronnie Whelan scored for Liverpool. And, you know, John Barnes was playing that day. Danny McGrain actually came on the park after it and done a lap of honour with Tommy. Danny had just been freed by Celtic, so he wasn't part of the centenary team, but he was there and he was in a grey suit, and I just remember the whole thing. And, you know, all these wee things that we talk about now, mate, like people selling macaroon bars and all that stuff, it's that kind of thing you remember. And I was just always one like, you've got to get a programme, it's got to be in pristine condition, you know, it's doing the front of your trackies and that when you were a kid to try and maintain it and not get any creases. And where I'm sitting right now, my Tommy Burns programme is somewhere in a pile in front of me here. There's piles and piles of Celtic programmes, and it's in there somewhere. I never got to meet the great man. I would have loved to have met Tommy, you know, but it was one of my biggest regrets, never meeting him.
Oh, Burns, what a guy, man. I'm the same. I've got loads of Celtic views up the stair as well, mate, for the 90s, early 2000s, stuff like that. I did get to meet Tommy, actually, on my 13th birthday. We went to Celtic Park, and went through, he was a manager at the time, and I met him and Billy Stark, and I had a picture of it. But honestly, I've lost it. And over the years, I don't know what happened to, obviously, moving houses, stuff like that, but because he'd put his hand over my heart. So that was just, unfortunately, I've lost it.
Incredible. Yeah, you're lucky to have met him. I mean, I have met his 2 daughters and one of his sons. And every single time I'm privileged enough to meet an ex-player who played alongside Tommy, you know, the way that they talk about that man, you just think to yourself, we were actually talking about it earlier on a Celtic State of Mind, how we haven't yet renamed the training academy, and, you know, Tommy Burns done as much as anybody to get that whole thing, that, you know, the oversight, the players that he worked with coming through the ranks. It would be brilliant. It would be a real tribute to rename it the Tommy Burns Academy. You know, I think that's well overdue in my view.
That's a great shout. I'd be fully behind that, man, definitely. a fantastic honour for a fantastic guy. You know what I mean? No, just on the park was he a great player. He was a really a total gentleman off the park as well. That's what everybody says anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like the era of Charlie Mulgrew, Aidan McGeady, all these guys coming through, having been through the academy at Celtic, and every one of them. Simon Ferry talks about him a hell of a lot on his show as well. Just the influence that this guy had, and I think it's important to a club like Celtic to always have that type of character at the club who knows Celtic inside out. No jobs for the boys kind of style thing, because he was obviously very good at what he did. But that's really important. It's part of the identity of the football club, isn't it? To have people like Tommy there.
Without a doubt, and it just shows you the character of him as well. You know, Walter Smith and Alan McCoy carried his coffin on that day, so he was just a great man. But going back to yourself, mate, when you were younger and that, obviously you got to that game. When did you get a season book early doors, or?
My first season ticket was 1994-95. Now, of all the cousins and uncles and all that stuff that went to the game, I don't think any of them had a season ticket, during the 80s and moving into the 1990s. I don't think any of them had season tickets. They always went to the games, home and away, but I don't think any of them did. And I've spoken to Jim Orr about this. Jim is one of the contributors on A Celtic State of Mind, and he was actually part of the first group of fans that got together to oust the old board. They were actually called Save Our Celts, and they preceded Celts for Change. And he was talking about that fact that, people didn't generally buy season tickets. So I think there was between 6,000 and 8,000 season ticket holders when Fergus McCann took over. And then he started advertising season tickets, Fergus, because he came over from Canada. He had a completely different outlook on football. And, his kind of view was, if you don't know how much money's coming in through the gates, how on earth can you plan? How can you have a business plan and a strategy? So probably through him advertising. I remember seeing the advert at half-time during the 1994 World Cup final. And the Celtic advert came up, buy a season ticket. Now, at that time, I would have been 15. So I bought a season ticket for 95 quid. And it was for Hampden Park, 94-95. And I remember I saved up because I had a paper round. If you're from the same era, you probably did the same. You either went on the milk or you went on the papers. And I saved that £10 a week up. And every week I then used my money to get on a supporters bus from a wee village called Blair Haw, run by Jokie Munyon, which was a relative of my granny's, because we live in a wee bit of Fife where somewhere along the line you're going to find out a connection, like through your family, that you're related to most people. Very small gene pool in Fife, the 5 villages. And so I was actually related to the guy who ran the bus, the dearly departed Jokie Munyon. He went to the 3 European finals that we were in. He drove to Milan in 1970. And as a young kid, I would be sitting in that bus just soaking up all the tales. But I'd been going to the games regularly with the old fella since I started going, but I just never had a season book until 94. And that was the beginning for me. It was one of the ones where you kind of went going through to Glasgow from Fife on my own, because my dad worked away, worked abroad and all that kind of stuff. You kind of felt like an adult because you had a wee bit of responsibility, jumping on the bus, going through to Glasgow, the big smoke, and watching Celtic. And it was basically my whole life revolved around that, mate. And pretty much it has done ever since,
Aye, mate, definitely. That Fergus McCann stat is absolutely amazing, by the way. I can't believe that. 68,000 season ticket. That's mental.
It's incredible. When you imagine now that you cannot get a season ticket, there's 54,000 season ticket holders. There was between 6,000 and 8,000. People who went in the main stand. Bizarrely enough, my season ticket is now in the main stand, but I'm not one of the prawn sandwich brigade. It's just the way it's worked out. I've been dotted around the stadium. Most of the season ticket holders were in there. They'd go in and they'd watch the game, sat down, and all the rest of it. I guess at that point, that was the modern part of the stadium. When Fergus took over, it was probably part of it was 20-odd-year-old, And now you look at the stadium, and the new bit is actually 31 years of age. It's getting old now. It's like you're looking at it now thinking it could be doing me a wee spruce up. But yeah, we went from around 6,000 to 8,000 season tickets, and we're up at 54 with a 2 or 3 years waiting list now. So it's sensational what Fergus brought to the football club.
Absolutely, what a man to think. I think a lot at the time, a lot of Celtic fans weren't sure about him. If I recall rightly, a lot of Celtic fans at the time just were a bit like, oh, who is this guy? What's he did? I think especially around about the times where, guys like Van Hooijdonk and Cadete and stuff like that were asking for extra money, and Fergus was like, "Nah, it's not happening." It's. And I think a lot of Celtic fans were like, "No, we need to spend this money," but he just knew what he was doing, didn't he?
He was a really focused businessman, like a hard-nosed businessman. And I remember, like around about the time that he took over, we knew through the kind of years leading up to that he was interested in investing in Celtic initially. But I think, football fans, because you're so attached to your club, so emotionally attached, as well as everything else, Fergus McCann, yeah, he came for Croy, but he'd been in Canada for all those years, and people might have looked at him and thought, are you emotionally attached? Turns out very much he was. And there was a great story, actually, that way back, there's a wee story in an old Celtic View that this Canadian businessman called Fergus McCann wanted to do the first ever live satellite broadcast of a European football game in Italy. And it was when Celtic were playing AC Milan in the European Cup. And he actually arranged, he lost money on it. He lost a lot of money on it way back when, back in the 1970s. It was Inter Milan. It was the semi-final when Inter Milan beat us after extra time. So, Fergus McCann was undoubtedly a Celtic fan. He was the secretary of the Croy Celtic Supporters Club when he was 16 years of age. He was a treasurer, he ran the finances for the club and all that. So, but you're right, once it got to the point where I think as a Celtic fan, you just wanted to stop Rangers from winning 9 in a row. And, you had this incredible team that Tommy had assembled. And a lot of that was down to the flair of these overseas players coming in. And he fell out with them, didn't he, Fergus? He fell out with Pierre, George Cadet, Paolo Di Canio, and others. So I think typically as football fans, you thought Fergus was the problem. I think time has been very kind to Fergus because we now realise, he wasn't the issue. He was being held to ransom. And he was no pushover, was he? Because obviously he took on Jim Farry as well, and he won that one as well, didn't he?
Yep. That's right, mate. Aye, that's the times I was going to the games as well, mate. I was, like I say, 13, 14 at that point. Under, when Tommy was in charge, stuff like that. Sat in the main stand with my dad and my uncle, unfortunately. None of them are no longer here anymore. But obviously I've got great fond memories of that, mate. But that as you say, the Tommy team was amazing. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to win the league because we couldn't beat Rangers, unfortunately. That was the problem with it.
Absolutely. I mean, we now know, when we look back, we now know that they were financially doped. And Celtic, if we tried to go toe-to-toe with them, we would have struggled financially because we were paying our taxes and we were paying the correct wages, etc. Everybody was properly registered. So, the history books will always say that Rangers won 9 in a row, but it's tainted for me, and you look at the way that Celtic did it. We paid all the bills, we paid all the tax, and it took a wee while longer. But I look at the period between Fergus taking over to the moment Martin O'Neill walked in the building. I just think it was a transitional period whereby we had to rebuild the stadium, we had to get the right manager in charge. We tried a few different things. By the time Martin comes in, Fergus is away. Alan McDonald's the chief exec. And, things were changing at that point, and we were willing to spend big money to bring Martin O'Neill in, and then obviously to back him in the recruitment as well, in the transfer windows. So, in fact, there was no windows back then, was there? You could sign players whenever you wanted. But I always see that as a bit of a transition, going to Hampden, coming back to Celtic, building a team, then Tommy leaves. It takes Wim Jansen to stop Rangers winning the 10 in a row. You've got the Venglos year, you've got the John Barnes year. Then Martin comes in, and since then, let's be honest, we have dominated. There's been a few trophies here or there, a few leagues here or there, but we've dominated for 25 years since then.
I know, it's great. It is crazy, mate, to think about that, all the years struggling, even just before, but, when you touched on that, like Lou McCarry years, stuff like that. I remember being really young, 8, 9-year-old, and Celtic were winning nothing. And actually, mate, you're actually quite lucky that you grew up in Fife. I grew up directly across from Ibrox. Would you believe me? So everybody was. I stayed in the high-rise flats right across Ibrox my whole up until I was like 15-year-old, and everyone around me, all my friends and all, were all Rangers fans, stuff like that. So I took it tough. Do you know what I mean? For many years. So I remember it well, mate. But Wim Jansen, the first year coming in doing that, incredible, absolutely incredible. To stop a Rangers team like that with all the players was outstanding.
I've thought about this a lot, and you know, I remember reading that Fergus McCann, he didn't want, you know, we had this tradition. We had a tradition that we would basically put in place a manager who had played with the football club. And up until Tommy Burns, the only manager in the history of Celtic who hadn't played for Celtic was Liam Brady. And, you know, that was the club's tradition. It was generally you would play for the club. Often you would captain the club. You would end up being the manager. And Fergus made this point, and I only know this because I've read all the books around that period, and I've spoken to people who knew him, particularly David Lowe, who was Fergus's financial advisor. And Fergus decided that he needed a coach that wasn't as emotionally attached to Celtic as the previous managers had been. And that's why we went for something completely different, Wim Jansen. At some point, there was talks with Bobby Robson to come in as a manager. That would have been sensational as well, by the way. What a manager he was. But Wim Jansen comes in. He knew all about Celtic. I mean, he played for Feyenoord when they beat us in the 1970s European Cup final. He knew who Celtic were, obviously. But he came in and he didn't have that same emotional attachment to the club. And when you talk to the guys that played for him, like Simon Donnelly, Jackie Mack, you know, it was one of the things like after a defeat, he wouldn't give you the post-mortem in the dressing room. He wouldn't go through anybody. He wouldn't give you the hairdryer treatment. He would just say, you know what, we'll talk about it on Monday. And he just left everybody just to go away and kind of deal with it themselves. So a completely different approach. But I think that obviously the key will always be the fact that Henrik Larsson came to the football club and Wim Jansen knew him from the Netherlands. And I mean, I've said this and I'll say it again. He's probably the last world-class Celtic player we'll see playing for Celtic whilst world-class. I know people might say Van Dijk went on to become a world-class player, and there might be others, but Larsson in the hoops was world-class. He absolutely was world-class. And the only thing he didn't really achieve was a European trophy for us. And he came very, very close, though, didn't he?
He did indeed, mate. I totally agree with you, the Van Dijk thing. I mean, Van Dijk was excellent when he was up here and stuff like that, but what he had was potential. You know, I think that's why Southampton bought him. They knew what he was going to become, but he wasn't the finished article up here by any means. But Larsson, absolutely amazing, mate, when he first came in. Obviously, it didn't start very well. Passing the ball to his Chick Charlie, as everybody, you know, talks about. But those players in that Wim Jansen team were just absolutely amazing. As you say, Simon Donnelly, Jackie Mack, Henrik Larsson, you know, even guys like Harold Bright, brought Harold Bright back in, who wasn't the most, you know, he done okay, you know what I mean? Obviously scored that goal against St Johnstone, stuff like that. But the whole to Paul Lambert, stuff like that, you know what I mean? So it was excellent.
The midfield was absolutely pivotal. You look at the New Year's Day game, the 2-0 game where the two midfielders score, Lambert and Burley, or Lambert and Butler, as their teammates called them. And, you know, I learned that they were already on our radar, you know. Those two players were already on Celtic's radar when Tommy Burns was the manager. And I had the great pleasure of speaking to Paul Lambert. I've never ever spoken to Craig Burley. And Paul Lambert spoke about this. He says, you know, Tommy tried to sign me a few times. So all the scouting and all that kind of stuff had already been done. I mean, back then it was literally a filing cabinet that Davy Hay and guys like that would actually keep scouting reports in, and they would physically go and watch the players. So we had watched Burley, we had watched Lambert, and that was a wee bit of a legacy. Tommy never won a title with Celtic; he only won the Scottish Cup. But you know, they were his two targets, and then Celtic signed them after Burns had left, and they were massive. I mean, the goals scored for midfield, particularly by Burley, who doesn't do much in terms of media and stuff, you know, when talking about Celtic, does he? He never pops up. You never see him doing any of these Q&As or any of that kind of stuff. And I don't know why we like some players and we don't really warm to others, but Burley was sensational in that campaign. I know that he kind of, I think there was a falling out with him and Barnes eventually, and he left the football club, but I thought Burley was brilliant for Celtic.
He was, I totally agree. I remember him well, he was brilliant. You know, I think, has he not moved to America now? Is that no kind of thing?
That's probably why, you know, and I think he does media for one of the networkers over there, one of the networks. But Celtic, I'd love to chat to him and speak to him about the kind of Celtic thing, because again, one of the young Scottish players who went down south, you know, down to Chelsea, and when we bought him, it was something of a coup, because we win the league under Wim Jansen, and then it's the 1998 World Cup finals, and loads of Celtic players are in that squad when you think about it. You know, Johnny Gould, Tosh McKinley, Tommy Boyd, Jackie Mack, Simon Donnelly, Paul Lambert, Craig Burley. I mean, you're looking at that 7 for the Celtic squad go to the World Cup finals. And of course, some of them playing that first game. I think Burley scored in the tournament, if I remember
I did.
correctly.
I
Did he
scored
not?
against Norway.
Yeah, the peroxide hair. So I've
Aye.
got fond memories of that period, and it really was. I remember the cup final '95 against Airdrie, just a feeling of relief after that game that we got the monkey off our back, we won a trophy, but the league was the must win, and we did it. And we've the only downside, of course, was he left straight after the final whistle, virtually. After St Johnstone, he left the football club. There was a friendly in Lisbon, and that was him away, and that was a shame, because you kind of thought to yourself, if you look at the players we signed the following year, Viduka, I think Vidal Riseth came in, Lubo, Mialbi. You add them to a Wim Jansen team, and you think to yourself, we could have won it again. I'd need to check this, but I'm pretty sure Venglos' team were only a few points behind Rangers the following season. So it's not like we got absolutely collapsed,
No.
But Wim Jansen, fond memories of the wee man. And he's a bit of a cult hero, one of the guys, he just came, done the business and left, and we all love him for it.
Incredible one season, just bang, get the league away he goes. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but what a guy. But I was on the park when we beat St Johnstone that day. Were you there? Were you at that game yourself?
I spoke about this last week. I fully expected us to win it in my hometown of Dunfermline, obviously, the previous week. And I wanted us to as well, because on the day of the St Johnstone game, me and my brother were in a wee band. We've always loved our music as much as our football. And we were in this wee band, and this promoter was promoting one of our gigs, and he took us to Kirkcaldy on that day of the St Johnstone game. So we were actually promoting an event on that day. And I remember coming back to through from Kirkcaldy to Dunfermline and listening to the game on the old radio, and getting out of the car, and Celtic fans with the scarves and the flags. I mean, Fife has got a massive amount of Celtic supporters, but there's a huge Rangers fan base through here as well.
Yeah.
So, when that happened, as I say, I would have loved it for it to have been in Dunfermline. I think 1968 we clinched the league at East End Park, and I was looking back at that, knowing that I was going to be busy on the day of the St Johnstone game. So no, I wasn't on the park getting huckled or anything on that particular day, unfortunately.
I didn't get huckled, but I was on the park that day. And that's another one where I took a bit of grass. I remember getting up to where Bratback scored, and I was, what age would I have been? So it would have been 90. I was 98, wasn't it? So I'd have been 12. I remember getting up to the bit where Bratback scored, pretending that I was, I took a shot or that, like he'd done and stuff like that. I got a bit of the grass, took a bit of the grass off the park, took it home, put it in a cup. No idea what's happened to that either, man. It's gone. So
I did that one time, right? It was actually, it wasn't a game, it was a concert at Celtic Park. It was U2, 1993. And where we were standing, everything was like grills on the floor, but there was spaces, like, and you could actually pull the turf out. And I remember looking around, the jungle had seats in it. You remember for one season, they put the seats in the jungle. It just didn't look right. And U2, Zoo TV. So I did likewise. I nicked a bit of the turf. God knows where it went, mate. I might have planted it in my back garden, actually, and it'll probably still be there through my mum and dad's.
I wish I'd done that one.
1993, my first ever concert, Celtic Park. So that was fitting as well.
Do you know what I remember about that St Johnstone game as well? I remember, obviously I had a season book for a few years at that point, and I remember that was the day. It was a scorching sunny day, and I always remember thinking, like, not one seat was empty. It was like the first time I went, wow, Parkhead is like, it was very claustrophobic that day. I remember thinking there was people, no doubt in my mind, there was people snuck in and all that as well, because it was just, I was like, wow, look at this is incredible. And then I was just behind when Larson curled that in, man. Oh, what a memory that is, man.
I've watched that back so often as well. You have some regrets when you look back, because certain events in your life take over on that account. Probably unacceptable to put a gig before the football. But, you speak to Celtic fans who have been going for 30, 40, 50 years, and there's certain moments where, through life or work or whatever. My dad, for example, the man who introduced me to Celtic, for many, many years worked abroad, so he missed a lot of games during that period, and you look back and you regret them. But you try to relive them and retread the steps a wee bit. And I look at that particular team, and as you say, every seat being full. I remember the game against Newcastle when we came back to Celtic Park, and it was similar. You looked at that stand, and it was just like unbelievable. You know, it was just mobbed and such a buzz because we were on this upward trajectory. And the reason I bring that up, obviously, is because we're playing Newcastle in the forthcoming summer period. And I just hope that we're able to pull in a crowd, because the way that the game has been announced and it's not on a season ticket and all that kind of stuff, it's basically you're hoping for general sales, £25 tickets. And there's nothing worse than seeing empty seats, mate. There is nothing worse. And, you know, the way I look at it, there should never be an empty seat, even if it means a kid who doesn't get to the game somehow manages to go to a game because it's available. So on Axom, we constantly go on about a ticket exchange scheme where, you know, if you're a season ticket holder and you can't make it, then you just exchange it to someone else, maybe someone else on the supporters bus or elsewhere. And it's all done online. It's all done remotely. And we can do that. It's easy done. Loads of football clubs do it. But for some reason, we don't have that. And that's a frustration for me, because even in sold out games these days, there's a lot of empty seats, you know, and there's people can't get a ticket because the season ticket holder doesn't have a system where they can actually pass it on remotely. So there's all these wee things we talk about constantly on Axom, just wee things that we could improve at the football club, because I agree with you. I think a full Celtic Park creates an energy, and that seeps into the players. And, you know, we suffered during COVID because the fans weren't there. And when we are there, we can be that, you know, that cliche, that 12th man. It definitely works, makes a difference. And I would love Celtic as a football club who are cash rich, who are at the top of their game, just to implement these wee things and improve these wee things for the fan experience, you know, because it does help the club. And if your stadium's full, people buy stuff in the stadium, food and drink and whatever. So, you know, the average revenue per seat is zero if nobody's sitting in it. So if you think about that as well, you know, fill the seats, get people in the stadium. And I think we should increase it as well, mate. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I think we should level out the main stand and bring it up to about 70,000, 75,000. And, you know, that I think that's long overdue as well.
I don't see it wrong with that at all, mate. That sounds ideal to me. You know, obviously you're saying about the ticket exchange thing. Have you approached the club with that at all, mate? Because obviously you've got a big following, you're influential, and that's what the club would probably listen to you. Have you tried approaching them about it?
Probably the best forum that they suggest for things like this is every so often they do a fans forum. Now you can go in person, and for a period there you could actually dial in. And it was during that kind of engagement that you'd be able to make suggestions like this. But it has been. It's been promoted to the club. Everything comes down to cost. And it's like the implementation of a new computer system. But the way I look at it is, you know, if we want to be, I think it was Brendan Rodgers that said it, or it was mentioned in an AGM, want to be world class in all these different areas. Now, you might not be able to be world class on the park, because you might never have enough money to do that. You could spend £200 million and still not win a Champions League. But you could have a world-class recruitment department, a world-class ticketing system. You know, you could have all these things in place, a world-class youth development structure. And I don't think we're quite there behind the scenes with a lot of that. But we're in safe hands. You know, I'm not sitting here complaining. We are in safe hands, and we've been well managed for quite a few decades now. So we're nitpicking a wee bit as Celtic fans, but that's fine. That's fine. I mean, it's definitely been proposed. So whether or not there's plans for it, I'm not too sure.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying about the world class thing, that kind of reminded me. Don Mackay, when Don Mackay into him, it was the chief executive when Ange started. I'm sure he was going about saying that we need to be world class off the park. You know, might not be able to do it on the park, but obviously off the park. But obviously he wasn't there very long.
That was interesting, that, you know, because it's never really been spoke about in any kind of detail. And I get that him as an individual, he wouldn't be able to speak about it for I don't know how long, but there'll be some kind of non-disclosure agreement between him and the club, all legally binding. But, you know, it was one of the ones where he said a lot of good things, you know, in the 70 odd days that he was in post. I think he spoke the fans' language. And during that period, my experience of him is that as a platform, a Celtic state of mind couldn't get near the club in terms of press conferences and events and stuff. We couldn't get in. We couldn't get in, you know, at all. We couldn't get through the lockkeeper. And so when Don Mackay came in, he saw the value of fan media, alternative media, having a bit of discourse and people coming in with new ideas and a new approach. And like legitimately, this happened. He phoned everybody on their mobile phones. Seriously, I remember getting a phone call, and it was one of the 1888 numbers. So you're thinking it's something to do with tickets or whatever. And I answered it was the chief executive of the Celtic Football Club, but he was doing it honestly, and he did it for everybody. He phoned everybody up who had a
That's
channel,
crazy,
or who had maybe approached them in the past and said, "Can I get on a rota system?" And he invited us all in for the unveiling of Ange Postecoglou, and that was the beginning of a different approach by the club, where previously it was a bit of a closed shop in that respect. But then Don Mackay opened the doors and said, "No, you know what? We're going to bring you in, and we're going to give you the opportunity to speak to the manager and speak to the players and come and do different events and stuff like that." And I've got to give him credit for that, because he kick-started all that kind of stuff. He had a different approach to things, didn't he? But I don't know. Has he ruffled feathers? Will we ever know? I don't know. There's a culture at a football club, and maybe he just didn't fit in. But he only lasted 70-odd days, didn't he?
I did. It was a weird one. I remember sitting in my work and just hearing it being announced. I was like, what? And then, as you say, nothing's been announced at all since, why or whatever. Yeah. But I was going to say there, mate, he did start that, because obviously every press conference I watch now, you do kind of get a lot of fan media still there, yourselves and obviously the other ones, stuff like that. But talking about that, mate, I want to talk about your podcast and how it came about. Obviously, how long were you thinking about doing it, and then what made you kickstart it?
Right, well, this is where I come across as a real anorak, right? Because I've never kept a diary in my life, but what I do is I've always got journals. There's my current one, right? I've always got journals, so to-do lists, whatever, and all the ideas and everything that I ever have go into that. So every time I watch a game that I'm analysing, a minute by minute, taking notes and all this stuff. And then what happens, obviously, when I'm doing one of our shows, I'm armed with notes. I very rarely refer to them, but they're all there just in case I need them. And I remember writing down a plan for a podcast. And Kevin Graham, who has appeared since the very, very beginning on A Celtic State of Mind, a good friend of mine, he'll tell you it's all set out. A Celtic State of Mind. It's going to be a podcast. This is how it's going to look. We're going to do this. We're going to do live events. And it was all planned in this wee journal. And the interesting thing was the first guest I ever approached was Paul Gallagher, the older brother of Liam and Noel, right? And it was just off the cuff. I was at a gig, right? I was doing in Warrington, and I was watching. Remember Liam's band BDI that he had after races? So I was watching them, and it was the weekend of the Stone Roses gigs at Heaton Park, and this was a warm-up gig. Me and my pal drove all the way down to Warrington, and we were up the back just watching BDI. And there's Paul Gallagher, and I knew he was a Celtic. I knew he was a mad Celtic fan, right? He used to come up, and he's got pals in Blantyre and all that, and he would like legitimately come up for home and away games for Manchester back in the 80s and the 90s. And I was like, "You want to be on my podcast?" And he was like, "Aye, absolutely, mate." That was in 2012. Now the first episode happened 5 years later, so it just shows you that I had this concept. You know what I mean? I had this concept, but it didn't really come to fruition for a while, and then eventually it did. And the whole idea behind it was, we've all, like what we're doing now, we've all got a Celtic story. There's an entry point. Some it's at birth, and there's been generations of your family who have supported Celtic. Other people have got really interesting tales on how they became Celtic fans and stuff like that. So it was all about really just talking to people, like-minded people with a Celtic state of mind, and just hear their stories, their experiences. You know, that if you think about it, you were talking about memories of like going to football with your old man. How many of us have got these memories of being at games with people who are no longer with us? And you walk into Celtic Park, and it brings back all the memories and the energy around that. And I love that. Absolutely love it. And then we started talking to, because we're interested in film and music and all the rest of it, people who are involved in all these different arts who are all Celtic fans. So, you know, I was blagging it. I'm going to be honest. I was blagging it. I was just getting a contact, emailing them, asking guys like James Allen out of Las Vegas, fancy coming on. And then we eventually, things were happening. Like we started singing This Is How It Feels to Be Celtic. And I'm saying to Kev, we should get Clint Boone from the Inspiral Carpets on. He's not even a Celtic fan, but it's his song. So, you know, we'd phone him up, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew. But with just about everything I've ever been involved in, it's just really like, right, where are we? How can we make it better? And so started off at the kitchen table. Then it was like, let's book some studio time. Let's go into a studio. So we did that, and there was a really cool place in Stirling. So we were in Stirling for ages, and what we used to do is we would book it once a month, and we would have 4 hours, and we would actually record 4 episodes in one day. So we'd get like 45 minutes per guest, and there would be a wee 15-minute kind of turnover. So we all had it all scheduled, and then we would upload 1 episode a week. But it was all about quality, making sure the sound was right. We had no video at the time. We had no equipment, at the time. And streaming, people might have been doing it for meetings at work and stuff, but nobody was kind of live streaming at that time. So the idea then was to go from a studio in Stirling that you were renting out to our own studio, so that was the next step. And it's just kind of gone like that, mate. It was always like, what are we doing, right? How can we make it better? So there's always like the next step to try and make it better. And I think the key is keep an eye on content, but not necessarily within your field, not necessarily within your genre. Watch loads of other types of content online, see what's working, see what people are doing that's quite original. Because generally speaking, you can take a template, even if it was like a fashion show or a movie show, and you can reproduce that and replicate it as a Celtic show. So we've always kind of done that, and it's held us in good stead. And the thing is as well, it's enjoyable, because I remember when we started streaming every day and people were saying, what are you going to talk about every day for an hour? I was like, well, every time I speak to my dad for an hour, we talk about Celtic. Every time I meet up with my mates who support Celtic, we talk about Celtic. So it's going to be like that. And, I've never, ever once had a moment where I've had nothing to talk about. And we have streamed every single weekday for 1 hour for the last 5 years. And we've covered every single game in the 5-year period as well. So never a moment where there's nothing to talk about when it comes to Celtic.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. I'm similar. Like for years and years, mate, I've been watching podcasts, stuff like that. I'm not really into watching TV stuff like that anymore, to be honest with you. So all I do is watch football and podcasts. So for years and years, I was watching podcasts, particularly yours. Other ones as well. Obviously, like through lockdown, and I always thought I really want to do this. This is something I really want to do. And I always thought to myself, why would anybody care about my opinion or whatever? But then you don't need to be involved in the game, I suppose. You know what I mean? Look at yourself, other guys as well out there that people do care about. So eventually I was just like, and then I thought, I don't know where to start. I had no idea, no technical at all, anything like that, when it comes to computers and downloading stuff like that. And then I'm learning it bit by bit. Even now I'm still struggling, but, every day I'm trying, as you say, that's what I've got in my head. Every day I'm just trying to get better, keep putting out content. And that's the thing, I was, you're a Celtic podcast, and I was thinking to myself, do I want to be a Celtic podcast, or do I want to be like just a neutral British football? Because I love all football, and I wanted to get different kind of guests on, stuff like that. So I just kind of made the decision, right, I'm going to just be a neutral podcast. Well, I'm not going to deny I'm a Celtic fan. It could never happen. So, just try and do that, you know what I mean? But as you say, there's always stuff to talk about in football in general. There's always stuff happening.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to content creation, as it's called, we've ventured into doing things like live music sessions, and we recorded 73 music sessions. Some of the people were established, some of them were emerging, some of them had never appeared on the telly or received recorded anything. And so I have tried to dip into these other avenues and different genres, because I'm interested. And you think, if you're interested in music or movie or whatever, then you can cover it, and you can cover it with passion. And a wee bit of knowledge, because you'll have an opinion on certain things. And so when it comes to Celtic and football, the other thing I would say is, I always feel that Celtic fans, because this thing, fan media, it's not new. There's been fanzines kicking about for decades, and that is a kind of early form of fan media. And I always felt that Celtic did that really, really well. Celtic supporters, going back to the 80s and 90s, my memories of going to watch Celtic were on supporters' buses. And then, going home on that drive to Fife when we were pretty rotten. So, a lot of people were disagreeing and going on about how bad we were and how to change it. I'd be sitting there reading Not the View, on the bus on the way home. And the very thought that it was just fellow Celtic fans having the similar conversations that we were having on the bus, but actually writing it down and editing it, and then doing wee cartoons and wee funnies and all that, and putting it all together and having it all organised, And for this magazine, this wee fanzine to come out once a month, I ended up subscribing to it. I've got every single edition from, I think, 1 to 100 in front of me. I don't buy the paper editions so often now. But I always felt Celtic were kind of ahead of the curve. The fans were very creative. They were able to do it, pull it together. They were funny, had a sense of humour. So I'm not surprised now when it comes to fan media, if you like, that Celtic supporters are able to create quality or humorous. We didn't go for the funny. We try and just have a balanced kind of channel. But there's so many things out there on the socials, mate, where something happens and within a minute, Tam Selleck's got a video on Twitter, and you think, who is this guy? It's a sense of humour that we've always had, and it's that creativity and being able to create an item of media, be that a fanzine or books. I mean, God Almighty, is there a football club in the world that's had more books written about it than Celtic? And a lot of them are written by the fans. David Potter, who passed away a couple of years ago, Tom Campbell, who just passed away. These guys were just mad Celtic fans who loved writing about the club, And so I'm not surprised that there's top quality content creators out there. And not just for Celtic fans. I mean, Simon Ferry's an ex-Celtic player, but look what he's done. Look at that channel that he's built. That's unbelievable. That's a phenomenon, what he has created there, Open Goal. And I mentioned Simon. I know there'll be a whole production team behind it and stuff, but Simon's the face of it, isn't he? And it's like, if you take Simon out of it, it's not the same thing. But unbelievable talent. And as I say, that's more of the humorous kind of stuff. And that's the Scottish football humour and the pattern and all that. So I love all that kind of stuff. And I think we're really well catered for when it comes to Scottish football media.
Absolutely, mate. Totally agree. I wanted to ask you, like, see when you're doing your lives and stuff like that, how do you do the format? Do you discuss it beforehand, just specific topics, and then just go for there?
Right, here's the thing, right? And anybody who contributes to Axom will tell you this. Anybody who comes on the show hasn't got a clue what we're going to talk about, right? They don't. They absolutely don't. But I always have, I try to get like 12 discussion points written down in my wee journal here. 12 discussion points. It's easy when there's games, obviously. Absolutely simple, particularly when there's 2 games a week. But what I would generally do is there's a great news aggregator site called Celtic News Now. So every single story overnight since you've last done a show will be on this website, and I just go through and just say, all right, we've not discussed that, take a wee note of that. So I always go in with 12 points, but I never share them with the contributors. Now I do that deliberately, right? Some people might think that's cruel, but it's really just to get the raw reaction for people. So there's been a lot to talk about recently. There's a title party at the weekend there, and the Glasgow City Council have tried everything in their power to make it difficult for Celtic fans to celebrate the fact that we've won 4 in a row. So we'll talk about that, and everybody will throw in their opinions. And the key to Axom is that we do need to have a range of opinion. It's not an echo chamber. So, with regards to the agenda, if you like, I don't want anybody to go in armed. Otherwise, they might think, right, I don't want to be too controversial, so I'm just saying that. What you get is raw and honest opinions from the contributors. And we've got, in total, we've got a WhatsApp group. There's 30 contributors, be that blogging, live events, or the live streaming, who all contribute to Axom. So you're going to get a wide variety. And, we're based in Scotland, Ireland, England, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and Hungary. We're based all over the place. That just shows you what Celtic fans are like. We're everywhere. So, that's how I set it up, mate. It's maybe not the best or the perfect way to do it, but everybody's quite happy with it. So we just run with that,
I think it's fantastic, mate. And it's amazing the community you've built, stuff like that. Look at the comments, and you're always getting comments. There are always people interested in your conversations, stuff like that. What's the plans for the future then, mate? You're just going to continue to do what you're doing, or have you got any kind of upcoming ideas that you're willing to talk about?
Well, where we are just now, it's we could probably just continue to do what we're doing. This is the thing. We could, stream every day at 12:30, do an hour every day. We've got a Friday night show now. The Friday night show is fully produced, and I think that it's important on a channel to actually have that. Now, I have absolutely no videography skills, no lighting skills, no audio skills. So the way that I approach that is I get a freelancer, a guy called Gordon, who's tremendous, who just comes in and films in a venue in Glasgow called Barras Art and Design. And we do it once a week. So that on the channel, there is always fully produced content. So you've got all your live streaming stuff, but there's always that wee nugget on a Friday night, which is polished. And we want to do more of that kind of stuff. But there's a couple of wee things that kind of hold you back from doing it. The first one is getting a venue where people can meet up. Now, as I've just said to you there, with regards to our contributors, they're spread all over the place. So dialing in's a good thing in that respect, where Kevin in Hungary or Sean in Australia, they can just dial in, and that's brilliant. However, I think that there's a space where we can go in Glasgow and do it. Although it's a live broadcast, it's going to be fully produced. So that's been in the kind of works for a few months now. And so the bulletin's going to look a bit different. It's going to still be the bulletin that we do every day at 12:30, but it won't be in a kind of dial-in format. We're going to be sitting in a studio, and we're going to do it that way. So that'll then basically put you to a point where you're creating fully produced content every day. And then the chaps that are dialing in from elsewhere will still have a space on the channel. You know, it just might be nighttime or whatever time suits them a wee bit better. So that won't disappear entirely. Live events, we do a lot of live events. We do one Axom live event every single month. Now, you were talking about community. That's a great way of people actually meet. So what happens is they talk to each other on the comment section of your YouTube video for years. All of a sudden, they actually meet in person, and they sit and have a jar and, you know, enjoy a Celtic night. We'll have a band on and a Q&A with an ex-player. So that's been a really good development for us. And, you know, taking that further afield. So we've got an event in June, which is in Belfast. Have we travelled further? We've been invited to Madrid. We've been invited to Australia when Ange was the manager. We've been invited to America. So I think we can take it further afield as well. But having that base in Glasgow is going to be huge for us. It's going to be massive because, you know, I'm based in Dunfermline. Nobody's come to Dunfermline, and I don't blame them, right? But Glasgow, that is the centre. That's the epicentre, isn't it? So if we've got a wee studio space there, people can just pop in, and it's just going to be so much easier. There's lots of other stuff. I mean, we're working on merchandise. We've always done merch, but we've been working with a really good designer, and it's a wee bit more kind of less is more. So we're not going to release 20, 30 jerseys a season. We're going to have T-shirts and maybe have a range once a year and introduce that. So everything's on our website now, which is, you know, this has been kind of generated by the fact that social media have the algorithm means that even if you've got a big following now, what you put in it's not really being seen by the same amount of people that used to see it. And you might notice it yourself on Twitter. You might say, I've not seen such and such posting for a while. Maybe they've unfollowed me or whatever, or maybe they've disabled their account. And you find them and they're posting every day, but you don't see their posts. So the algorithms have changed on Facebook and Twitter because what they want to do is they want companies to pay to be seen, right? They want you to verify, get on a subscription, and then pay for your advertising to be seen because they don't want you to get 1 million impressions for free, you know? So I noticed that probably over the last year, that's started to happen in a big way. So we've got a wee hub, axom.net. We've got a mailing list. There's only 10,000 on it at the moment, but these are the people that have signed up. So you could email them a few times a week. You give them your latest video. You give them maybe a ticket link for your next event. So we've created more of a tribe within the website. Whereas when you're on the socials, it's like you could throw something out there and you're not sure who sees it. You're not sure who clicks on the link. You can look at some of your analytics on YouTube. So we've kind of moved in that direction, and it's keeping us ticking along. And with regards to things like the live events, we can make them bigger, you know, so we could have a convention. We could do all-day events in Glasgow. We do live fan zones for a lot of the games that obviously previously it was difficult to get a ticket for Ibrox. No, everybody can get over to the away European games. So we have them on the big screen, free pies, everybody's getting a drink and maybe a musician, a Q&A, that kind of thing. So I think that eventually what will happen, and I've said this a few times, there'll be no distinction between mainstream media and alternative or fan media. I just think there's just going to be media, and it's either good or it's bad. And you'll either tune in or you'll ignore it because it's levelling off. It really is levelling off. There's a lot of fan media outlets out there with big sponsorship deals, big brand deals. They're bringing in a lot of money. And the mainstream are paying people off constantly. And a lot of the kind of mainstream journalists are now tapping into the fact that, I could have my own channel. You see all the ex-players, they've all got their own channels now. 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. You wouldn't have been able to see the Rio Ferdinand show or the Peter Crouch show. It's got a YouTube channel now, and they're doing it themselves, and they're getting brand deals, and they're generating a lot of money. So I think there's definitely a future, but you've just always got to kind of keep moving and make sure that, I could sit here and just do the next 3 or 4 years live streaming, but what will happen is somebody else will overtake you and find something newer, and that'll get the more attention. So I constantly looking to change and keep up with times. AI is going to be massive as well, mate. AI is going to be huge for the content creation game. I think a lot of bloggers who only blog in a kind of reporting style because they've now found the stories out there, and they just report it. I think they'll struggle because AI can do that, and AI can do it quicker, and AI can do it probably better as well. So you've got to have your own niche. And I think on content creation, the big thing is if you get that wee tribe and they stick with you, you'll be absolutely fine. It's a wee bit like music. A lot of these bands who have stood the test of time, it's because they look after the people that buy their tunes. So if we look after our audience and we keep, having a more of an engagement in the live events kind of sector as well, then, we'll continue to grow, and then spread it. Go to Australia, go to America, and constantly create that content. I'm playing at Celtic Park on Monday, mate. That's the bizarre thing that happens, right? These are the mad things that happen, and I'm wondering. I don't know if I'll be able to do it. I don't even have asthma, but I'm going to need an inhaler. But these things fall into your lap, and you're just like, I'm not worthy of that. That's crazy.
I'm feeling like an absolute dafty now, but talking about a wee bit of grass that I picked up 30 odd years ago.
These are the things, honestly, mate, that 1 minute you're talking on your show that you've created at the kitchen table, and next minute an email comes in saying, yeah, we're doing this charity game and we want you to come along and play, and there's going to be some ex-players and stuff in it. That really is the definition of surreal. I don't even want a kick of the ball. I just want to walk about the park, and just look about. So I used to sit up there, and there's where my ticket is now. So all these things happen. But again, I'm looking at that on Monday thinking, what content can I capture? You could maybe go live on Facebook, go live on TikTok, and you're in the kind of hub, the changing room, and maybe walking out the tunnel and stuff like that. So yeah, it's changing all the time. And bizarrely enough, I've got an 8-year-old, and I look at his habits. I look at what kind of content appeals to a younger audience. And then you think to yourself, right, because in 5 years' time, I'm going to be 5 years older, and there's still going to be a young audience that are looking for content. How do you manage to satisfy that as well? So it's important to continually develop and progress it, and then just think, oh, it's worked before, so it'll keep working, It might be a case of I'm no longer on it because nobody wants to listen to me. So you find somebody else who presents it, and, they're new and up and coming and all this kind of stuff, and they're maybe going to be more popular. So I am prepared for all that kind of stuff as well.
That's not going to happen, mate. You're the star of the show, you know that.
But see, in 10 years when I'm going, I remember the 90s, people will be like, I'm sick hearing this.
But that does sound crazy. You're going to be playing at Parkhead on Monday, man. That is mental. I mean, I feel it's surreal even just talking to like ex-players, guys like yourself, mate, that are successful. I still find this just like, how's this happened? Do you know what I mean? But that's crazy, mate. It was just here about AI and stuff like that. But one thing about your show is it's organic. You know what I mean? It's like it's real people talking about real subjects that everybody loves. So every Celtic fan, every football fan loves to hear. But I'll need to get myself along to one of the events, mate, definitely at some point. But exciting times ahead, man. I'll be looking forward to seeing you in that studio and that as well.
Yeah, I am looking forward to that as well. And what I'll need to do, and it's always the same, it's like what you said, I'm just learning as I go along. So I will need to have far more knowledge about the technical aspect of that. My videographer can't do that for me every day, kind of thing. He's got other commitments. So when I go in, I won't have a clue what I'm doing. I'll have a few trial runs, but eventually I'll figure it out, mate. And then from there, it will just be a case of trying to improve that, getting more and more guests in. And because you're in Glasgow, it's like so many other people can just drop in. We do this show on a Friday nights. This is Axom. So if you ever get an opportunity to interview somebody like an ex-player, or recently we spoke to a film producer who's working on the Celtic Origins movie, fascinating guy. So they are far better suited to this fully produced show. But once a month, what we're doing is we're getting 4 talking heads, 4 people who are involved in Celtic media on other channels, and we're all in the same room round the table, and it's like Tino for the Celtic Exchange, ACSOM, Quinny from Celts are here, and there's others. Quinny's going to get involved, 67 Hill Media, and what you get then is the collaboration, and I think collaboration is key as well. We've done a wee bit with the Anfield Drap guys doing in Liverpool. They're an inspiration to anybody doing football content. I mean, what they've built is sensational. I think they employ something like 12 or 17 or something staff full time, which is just mad. I mean, they're a media company in themselves. So I just continually learning, mate, and hopefully improving as well. That's what we always try to do. And we've released a single. We released a music single and it got in the charts. All these mad things that have happened through wanting to set up a podcast. Listen, it only got into number 86 in the charts, but it got in the top 100, so I'm taking it. I'm taking it. Aye.
It's funny you mentioned Anfield there, but because me and my missus were down there a few weeks ago. And have you done the Anfield tour?
I've not. I was at Liverpool Stadium no last year, the year before. I'll tell you, the first time I went to Anfield was in 1990. I went to a game. It was Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest, 2 each. Ian Rush scored 2 and Liverpool were 2-0 up. And then Nigel Clough scored 2 for Forest in the second half. And then I went back a year and a half or so ago and I was blown away by it. It looked absolutely tremendous. There was a ceremony, an award ceremony down there. But we walked around the stadium and I was blown away with just how well kept it was, mate. And they were absolutely, everything you looked at was history. Everything was nostalgia. Every wall, every plaque, and from that, I'm looking at around about Celtic Park thinking, we could do this. We could have murals. We could have more statues. We could definitely do better. But I've never done the tour. How was that?
It was brilliant, mate. It was brilliant, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, we went round and stuff like that. It was brilliant. And there's a bit in it called the Carlsberg Suite. Mm-hmm. And we got in there and the boy was saying, this was, what was it, 4 weeks ago? And we went in there and he was saying, this is where a lot of podcasters get invited to. And he was like, mate, this is state-of-the-art bar, all the kind of, he's like media and podcasters, state-of-the-art bar, all the kind of equipment everywhere, stuff like that. It just looked amazing. I remember just standing there thinking, can you imagine one day that's, me and the guys or whatever just on out, and that's the dream, mate. My dream is actually to be invited to like Celtic Park or whatever to give a bit of fan media one day, but you never know, I suppose. But
you're right. That should happen, and also I think Celtic could take a bit of inspiration from clubs like Liverpool and have a suite, because there are spaces on match day. There's spaces that they could give us, but it's not been that easy since Don Mackay's left, to be honest with you, in that respect. Excuse me, but hopefully they'll get better, and they should look at English clubs to see what they're doing.
Absolutely, you just need to look about and see what's better and stuff like that. But before we go, mate, I wanted to touch on the current Celtic team under Brendan. It's been another amazing year. We've got a big cup final in a couple of weeks. What's your thoughts on the current team? Obviously, it's been amazing.
It has, aye. We had that period post-Ange where there was a transition between what Ange was doing and then what Rodgers wanted to do. And there were some players that kind of fell by the wayside, the biggest one being Kyogo, which, when you look at what he was doing under Ange Postecoglou, he was unbelievable. He was a hero. And there was a whole new generation of fans that loved him. He was like the young Celtic fans' hero, Kyogo. But that's what happens. A new manager comes in, new ideas, new style, and we're constantly changing. I was really disappointed when Brendan left because we lost a brilliant manager. I know a lot of people were upset with the way he left, etc., and I get that. But I just looked at the quality that walked out the door that day when Brendan left, and I thought to myself, we're going to really have to match that. We're going to have to match that kind of level of quality. Some people call that type of coach an elite coach. Others don't like that term. I'll tell you what, he's managed elite football teams and he's managed elite footballers, and nobody can deny it, when he was at Liverpool. So when he walked, I kind of thought, right, we are going to really have to go top of the level to get another manager in. And no disrespect to who replaced Brendan Rodgers, but I don't think we did that with Neil Lennon. I think we kind of played it a bit safe with Lenny. And then obviously after that, we had a Ronnie Dyler, which was, for me, it was something different. Didn't quite work out. Don't think he had enough power in terms of recruitment. He was being presented a lot of players that he had to work with. And then Brendan comes in, you know, and you think to yourself, wow, this is 13,000 turning up at the stadium. And we replace him again, as I said, with Lenny in the showers, and I just thought it was a bit of a lack of ambition. Ange Postecoglou was an interesting one, though, because, and I hope he wins the Europa League this season, by the way, but I think we won a watch. I don't think it was perfectly planned. I think that we were a wee bit lucky. But what he did at the football club is he gave us entertainment. The team was unbelievable to watch. And what I was disappointed about there was I wanted to see him in Europe again. I wanted to see another campaign in the Champions League under Ange, because he was building something special. And I mentioned this earlier. I would need to look at this, but when you look at the players that we've sold that came in under Ange Postecoglou, right, we've got Jota, who we sold for 25. We've got O'Reilly, who I think went for about 26. Abada went for 10. Kyogo went for 10. So straight off the bat, there's 17 million quid, right? And I think if in combined fees, we probably spent about 10 million on those guys. Probably 15 once you throw in Jota. But unbelievable business, great manager, a proper hard-nosed manager as well. He didn't take any flack at all from the Scottish media. He had the measure of him from day one. And then when he left, you know, the name Brendan kept coming up, and he was obviously going to games with Willie Hockey, who's his friend up here. And I was asked the question. I said, I'd take him back in a heartbeat. I would take Brendan back in a heartbeat. So I'm delighted he's here. I think in his first season, we weren't great to watch, particularly the first half of the season. But that's transition. That's all that is. And now we're seeing Brendan Rodgers, his team, flourish. And I think the key now, mate, is we go back out in the summer, and it doesn't matter if we sell a big name or not. We need another 3 kind of quality additions to Kieran Tierney. So you Tierney's in the door. You want another 3 top quality. And hopefully keep a hold of guys like Kuhn, Hatate, Maeda. But as a Celtic fan, you always expect to lose one, don't you?
Absolutely. I think one of them will go, unfortunately. You know, it seems to be when it comes to guys who are doing well and stuff like that, and if anybody if England comes calling or anything like that, you know, we are going to sell. But what I want a big centre half, mate. I obviously love Carter Vickers, but he's not got anybody alongside him, in my opinion, who is up to it. Trusty is just no for me, mate. I've seen enough now I hope I'm wrong. I hope he can turn that around and stuff like that. But I've made a few videos about it that I've kind of made my mind up about Trusty, mate. I think that he's not strong enough. He makes too many silly mistakes. His positioning is not good enough. Liam Scales as well, mate. You know what I mean? He's a solid one in Scotland, stuff like that. But if you want to go to the next level, you know, and I'm assuming that's what you're meaning by 3 quality additions to try and take it to the next level, you know?
Without a doubt. I mean, I always say that Liam Scales, for me, is on a par with Greg Taylor and Tony Ralston, right? So 9 times out of 10 in Scotland, right, if you look at that starting 11, you think, all right, that's fine. We can handle that. Now and again, they might get found out. But domestically, they're absolutely fine. But if you want to make that step up, and the thing with Scales is absolute credit to him, because we brought in Nat Phillips, Lagerbielke, Nawrocki, and Trusty, yet Scales is still the man with the jersey when fit. The thing with Trusty, I was thinking about this today. A pal of mine said to me, isn't it interesting that we keep hearing about this amazing English Premiership and, you know, best league in the world and all this. And you look at guys like Nat Phillips coming up for Liverpool, Jeffrey Schlupp coming up for Crystal Palace, and then Austin Trusty, albeit they had dropped down, but the previous season...
Shane Duffy
is another one. And these guys have come up. John Joe Kenny, shouldn't have mentioned him. These guys come up, and it's like they're decent level players down south. They come up here, and they're nowhere near it. I mean, Jeffrey Schlupp is nowhere near it either. I think he started off well, but even the game against Aberdeen at Pittodrie, 5-1 game, he does not want to go in where it hurts. He doesn't want to get injured. I don't know if he's maybe been told you've not got a contract, so he's protecting himself. But Trusty, for me, hasn't done enough. And it speaks volumes that when we go into that game in the Scottish Cup final, if fit, you're picking Scales over Trusty. You're picking Scales over Trusty. And this is a guy that came in for 500 grand for Shamrock Rovers, Irish League. And he's done brilliantly. Don't get me wrong. He's done absolutely brilliantly. But I agree with you. That's one of the areas. Left back, I think we're sorted with KT. Why? I mean, just bring in Andy Robertson, play KT in the centre of defence, and you can play Robbo at left back. But
Somebody was
striker.
mentioning that though, no, maybe no Robertson, but somebody was mentioning them, maybe the thought train, obviously they're trying to get Greg Taylor this new contract, maybe the train of thought is, get Kieran Tierney at centre-half alongside Carter Vickers and maybe keep Taylor.
Oh, well, Taylor, again, it's one of the most improved players under Ange. He really, he fitted into that inverted fullback role. He absolutely, for me, peaked. I think he peaked under Ange. And he's playing a slightly different role. Brendan Rodgers likes him, obviously. But it's one of the ones where we've seen it with players for years and years. We've seen it with guys like Samaras. Neil Lennon wanted to keep him, the board wanted to sell him. So it was one of the ones where if you're on 20, 25, or that's what you're looking for, and the club want to cut the wage bill, that's what will happen. Greg Taylor, has he earned it? Has he earned the right to be on 20 plus a week? Probably. I think probably. He's a winner. We go back to that culture that we started off the discussion with, talking about guys who know what it means to play with Celtic. He didn't come through the ranks, but he's been here long enough to have the winner's mentality. And during the season, I've gone up and down with my assessment of Greg Taylor. One minute I'm thinking, we can do better. And then I'm thinking, actually, as a backup, he might be pretty useful. So I hope he stays. But Schlupp, for me, I've seen enough. Schlupp can go.
I'm happy with Greg Taylor there as long as he's not starting every game, you know what I mean? But I do want somebody in. And would Kieran Tierney being centre-half, would that be the worst idea in the world? I mean, obviously, he's injury prone. He's no the quickest guy in the world. He's obviously maybe lost a yard of pace through the injuries. Would that maybe be an idea?
You imagine the ball carrying of a Kieran Tierney who has been up and down that wing his whole career. You imagine him just getting the ball in the centre-half area, because we expect our centre-halves to do that, to start the attacks. All our attacks start with the centre-halves, looking for that, the out ball to the wings. I think he could do that, no problem, mate. I really do. And if there is another option at left back, we can't keep Greg Taylor. Why not play Tierney in there? But I think guys like Trusty, he seems to have been getting less criticism than Adam Ida and Arnie Engels, who for me, over the piece, have had bloody good seasons. I mean, Arnie Engels at his age, the return that he's given, I know a lot of people say, but most of these goals are penalties. A 21-year-old who is a Belgian international, and he's playing, he's started every game in the Champions League, he's scored goals in the Champions League, he's had assists, he's had a good season, but for some reason, they two guys get the criticism, and Trusty seems to get off scot-free. But, it's one of the ones, maybe Brendan Rodgers thinks he can overcome that. He's 26 now, though. You think to yourself, can he become a harder player? I mean, he was bossed by Simon Murray at Dens Park, Boston Trusty, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure about him. Is he a backup? Possibly.
But see, just going back to Engels there, one of the reasons I think that Engels gets criticised so much is because he's a bit different, he tries things that a lot of players don't like to try. Doesn't always come off for him, he tries different balls. He tries to get in positions that maybe a lot of players don't do. And I think that kind of goes against him. I think a lot of Celtic fans like, get on the ball, make sure you're passing, correctly, stuff like that. But as Engels likes to kind of be a bit flamboyant, I mean, I think that's maybe part of it.
And also, you're coming in after Matt O'Reilly, and he's a different player. But he's coming in after the O'Reilly signing. He's a record by massive, massive pressure on his shoulders. But I look at him, maybe he needs a big game against Rangers. I don't think he's in an outstanding. He did well in the cup final when he came on, the League Cup final. But maybe he needs a massive game against Rangers where he's orchestrating the play and running the show and dominant. But I've seen him in Europe this season. I thought he'd done really well. Even against Aston Villa, you look at his data and you think to yourself, I always go back to something that someone said to me when we signed Edouard for 9 million, and he was a young guy coming from a French academy. The question was, could you sell him tomorrow for 9 million? Aye, well, he's worth it. And it's the same with Engels. If you sold him tomorrow, you would get at least your money back, and you'd probably make a profit. So I've got no concerns about him. I have got concerns about Trusty, though, especially when it's 6 million, because even in this day and age, 6 million's a lot for Celtic. We don't do that very often, do we?
No, definitely not, mate. And go back to the players you mentioned about possibly leaving in the summer. For me, out of the three, the Kun, Maida and Hatate, I'd like to see him go, but out of the three, I'd like to see Hatate go first. For me, I think it's a wee bit missing in a lot of games. People said against Rangers last week that Hatate was excellent and played. I honestly thought after that, I was like, am I watching a different game here? I thought he went missing, mate. I think that he was no worse than Engels, stuff like that. But obviously he's still a really, really good player. He's just not consistent enough for me this year.
No, it's consistency. It's absolutely consistency. And I think, see, when you hear Brendan now talking about the kind of relationship that they've had since Brendan's come in, it was pretty clear that, you know, in the early days, Brendan probably wasn't a fan either. And when you look at the appearances, I know he had injuries in that first season under Brendan, but he wasn't the first choice. You were going into Europe with Paulo Bernardo, and in a lot of the league games, David Turnbull was getting a shout. So I think this season he's looked really good until that injury at Pittodrie. He played in every single game. Never started every game, but he played in every game. But it was that consistency. And I think if Rodgers had been able to tap into the consistency, then what a special player he'd be. But everybody's got a shelf life. Everybody's got a cycle at Celtic. And it might just be his time. I think it would be too early for Kuhn to leave Celtic. I think he needs to do it consistently for a whole season. Brilliant in the first half of this season. Went off the boil. Starting to come into a wee bit again now at the right time, at the business end. But Maeda, it would need to be a huge offer for him to go, because we've got him on a good contract, a good deal, and if he had played through the centre for the entire season, he would have hit 40 goals this season.
Absolutely. I mean, I made a video at the time when Kyogo left, and it went a wee bit kind of mental. That was the first kind of experience that he's got a bit mental on social media. So I was like, oh, what's going on here? But I basically made a video saying Kyogo isn't the worst thing in the world, because Maeda could play through the middle. I get slaughtered, mate. I get absolutely slaughtered. You know, we should be bringing in Danny Ings and all these kind of guys and stuff. I'm like, what? You know, Maeda has played through there before. You know, he's done the job many a time, and he's proved that that's his natural position for me. It was his natural position actually in Japan, where he was playing up there. But you're saying about Kuhn as well, though. Kuhn was obviously, for me, by a country mile, player of the year up until January, and then Kyogo left, and Maeda just went on at a different level. It's actually really surprising to me that Maeda went on to actually win player of the year and all that, because for me, I thought it was a foregone conclusion by January.
Yeah, and again, Maeda, I remember the conversations, because we're talking about it every day. I remember comments coming in, people saying, you know, they didn't think that Maeda looked like the type of player that Rodgers would be suited to Rodgers. And look at him now. I mean, absolutely star man. But you're right, Kuhn for a long period there was the star man. And as football fans, we watch it and we think, well, is his head being turned? Is his agent filling his head full of nonsense? Does he try to get him into the Premier League? Far too early for him. You've got to develop, and you can't. I actually thought at the time it was too early for Jota to leave, but the circumstances were different. The money was just unbelievable off the scale for both the club and the player. So I understand why it happened, but it was premature in his career. And I think with Kuhn as well, when you look at his career, it's been stop and start. He's gone to clubs and it's not worked out. He got a bit of form with Rapid Vienna. He's had a bit of form with Celtic. I think he deserves it. I think he owes us another season. If Maeda goes, as I say, it would only be for a record transfer out of Scottish football. So if you don't get that kind of money, don't sell him. I mean, imagine him centre forward for an entire season, or even going old school. I've said this a few times. This is the one criticism of Brendan, but what do I know? Brendan's an elite manager. Imagine playing a couple of forwards through the middle, you know, Maeda and Ida. I mean, there's been occasions where you're kind of thinking to yourself, we don't need four at the back because we're maybe 3 or 4-0 up. Try something a wee bit different. But yeah, Maeda has been unbelievable this season. Unbelievable. And if that continues into next season, it would be impossible to keep him, mate, because we have got that track record. And he's at an age, 27, where people are thinking he's at his peak now. And it would need to be a record transfer fee to let him go.
Totally agree with you, mate. Well, I think that's a good place to end there, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Paul. You're a total legend, mate. One of the reasons why I started a podcast, to be honest, looking at your stuff, it was just brilliant to watch. Like I told you earlier, you know, one of the reasons, inspired me to do it and stuff like that. So good luck on Monday, mate. I hope
I don't get injured. Oh,
I hope you don't get injured, mate. I hope you keep your inhaler away, stuff like that. Everything goes well. Hope you have a good title party when it comes, mate, and hopefully win the cup final.
100%. No, thanks for the kind words. And obviously, I've spoken about this Friday night show that we do. And if you ever fancy coming along and being on that round table, talking about Celtic for an hour, you'd be more than welcome, mate. So we'll get that in the diary as well.
That's I'll tell you right now, mate, it's 100% yes, please. Thank you.
Brilliant.
So, good luck with the podcast and everything else that goes with it, Paul. So, thank you very much, mate.
Nice one. Stay in touch.
Cheers, pal.